Go. Good evening, Guy Anderson. Lovely for you to join me here on this beautiful sunny evening. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Not so sunny here though. It's raining.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. We had a torrential downpour here for 5 minutes today, and I was out in it, and I felt so cleansed, you wouldn't believe
Yeah.
it. It was really lovely, and I was working, and the guy who was with me was like, "Mate, you're going to get really wet," and I was like, "Bring it on." I was like, "Bring it on." So, yeah, it's we need a bit of rain, don't we?
We do. We do. My lawn's scorched.
Yeah.
But it's very clever watching what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I watch the
Yes.
clouds break up. They go up there in their planes and the clouds disperse. And then when it's a really lovely day, the clouds gather
Yeah.
and they're doing some incredible magic up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to stop
Yeah.
people from growing things.
Yeah, that's right. My potatoes have gone bizarre because they normally finish about mid-August, and they've all died off already. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, and interestingly enough, this year I've never seen it before, but all my potatoes are actually on the soil. They're half on and half. They're not buried at all. They've grown near the top of the soil. I don't know much about growing, but I do know that potatoes generally are underneath the ground.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've got all these potatoes that are literally half in the ground and half on the ground. So,
That's strange, isn't it?
well,
I,
yeah,
well, we know what they're doing, so maybe it isn't strange, really.
yeah, yeah. So, how have you been, Guy? Have you been busy? You've been out and about giving your talks and spreading the word?
Yeah, I'm always busy.
Yeah,
I'm always, yeah, always doing something. But
yeah,
no, I haven't done a talk for about 4 weeks now. I did my
no,
last one in North Devon,
yeah,
but I'm off to Portugal on Thursday for a week. So I'm going to Lisbon to have a look at the architecture
lovely,
and see if I can uncover some anomalies. And then I'm going to Knights Templar territory, 5 days in Tamar. So I'm going to have
lovely.
a rummage around there and see if I can get access into the main buildings.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Guy, just for our audience, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to at the moment and kind of why I've invited you here? Because obviously you've written a book. You've written two books, I believe.
I
Uh,
have.
and I'm not that far into your Tesla book, but I am getting there, and I'm flipping through it, which is really interesting. Some books I don't read books as I used to. I tend to be very unconscious with my reading. So I'll open it and I'll go, oh my God, that's a really amazing thing, and then I'll put it down. And your book is actually on my bed, believe it or not. So I kind of go into it and just have a little, play with what's there, and then come out and think, okay, that's great. So, but I'm getting a lot out of it, and so yeah, just give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm kind of where you are. At the moment, I'm reading. Do you know John Hamer?
I
Or
have
know of
been to
him?
one of his talks. Yeah, yeah,
Well, he sent me his latest books. I know John quite well, and he sent
yeah.
me his latest book that he co-wrote, 60 Degrees South. But I'm reading that and the Ethiopian Bible at the same time, so I flip between. But I'm always researching, even though you've got my first book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, which is about Tartaria, which a lot of people won't have heard of.
Mm,
Um, they will have heard of the Mongolian Empire, though.
mm.
The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Wow.
Um, so the reason for calling it Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, my first book, is because there's more to Tartaria than meets the eye. This isn't just an empire that
Mm,
was deleted. It actually involves Nikola Tesla and a repopulation program called the Cabbage Patch Kids or the Cabbage Patch Babies. And the doll was kind of hiding in plain sight, a soft disclosure of
mm,
exactly what went on. But it's a civilization that spun across the earth.
mm,
Everywhere in the world has very similar architecture, buildings that have that Greco-Roman style.
mm,
So my first book sort of explores what Tartaria was, um, what their ethos was, how they built their culture, and also their technology. Uh, Obviously, with the emphasis being on who destroyed it and why, Why was it
Mm,
hidden? The
mm,
second book's actually expanding upon repopulation, and it looks at human cloning, and it goes right the way back to the story of the Anunnaki, Enki, the
mm,
scientist creating us as a slave race, or the story of the Elohim, which is similar, or of course Genesis, where um, man is created, Adam is created, and then from a rib, a clone is produced,
mm,
which is how they would have cloned, up until very recent times. Um, so it's more of a deeper dive, and it looks into the homunculus. People trying over the years, people like John Dee, to try and replicate human life. And the reason for the second book being about cloning is because in my Facebook group, I put a post up saying, out of all of the chapters in the first book, which was your favorite?
mm,
And 70, I think it was 71% said it's the repopulation. You know, a lot of people believe that cloning's been going on for a very, very long time. I know there's companies out there like CloneAid that advertise to clone, you and you baby or partner,
mm,
but how long has it actually been going on? So I've been digging into that for 12 years now,
mm,
and put all my research into the latest book, but I'm about to start writing a third, which is the world's fairs and expositions that took place at the same time across the world, and
mm,
nearly all of them were destroyed by accidental fires.
mm. Interesting.
Um, yeah, that's called Whitewashed and Brainwashed,
Right.
and I'm hoping to have that out by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly researching, I suppose, what John Hamer would call the falsification of history.
Yeah.
What has been done, and by who, to give us a narrative, that we can just tick a box and say, okay, this person built this person invented that,
Mm,
and then we can move on. But I'm going back and digging a lot further and asking questions that frankly there aren't answers to, and
mm,
just trying to show people that we're going through a great reset now at with the very kind assistance of the World Economic Forum and that lovely man Klaus. Um, and that isn't a one-off. This happens all the time. There have been lots of resets. I think 9/11 was probably a reset. I think 2020, the outbreak was another reset. But great resets are where they wipe the population out and start again with a clean sheet. And
mm,
that was 1776
mm,
that last occurred.
mm,
In religious terms, they would refer to it as entering Satan's little season that we're in
mm,
now, where these parasitic people just cause devastation, pain, and suffering
mm,
for a short period of time, and then hopefully we go back to how things used to be
mm.
at the end of their reign.
Mm. Would you say, yeah, it's a huge subject, Guy, and I really appreciate you kind of how can I put it, turning up. You know, you've turned up at exactly the right point for people to kind of take on this information because I think a lot of people are their Overton window's grown, hasn't it? And they're much more open to new ideas. Um, uh, I mean, besides the question who is behind this, which probably we can talk about later or another time. My 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 question to you today is why do you think the subject of Tartaria has suddenly just blown up? Because I didn't know Tartaria existed at all before 2020, and I would consider myself, dyed in the wool researcher in terms of, the traditional kind of educate yourself uh, parallel narratives, and I'd never heard of it. And also, I think partly I knew about Nikola Tesla for many, many years, but I only really knew him as the scientist who was bought off by, you know, the Edison mafia. Um, uh, but again, why do you think that the Tartaria question is it because the last I'll just give you a quick example. In Bristol, we are seeing, where I live, we are seeing the wholesale construction of communist black cube buildings everywhere. Like
Mm.
boxes, modernist
Yeah,
boxes everywhere, and it is extraordinarily oppressive.
yeah.
The IKEA buildings, and if you came to Bristol now, you could go around. There are 10, 12, 15, 20 projects, and these new, even the smaller flats are disgustingly ugly, rectangular, cubic buildings that obviously, once you get into the creation of reality and you're living in a cube, you're working with that energy. And all these amazing buildings are disappearing. A couple of them are left in Bristol. Bristol's got beautiful architecture. So um, it feels to me like that is part of the great reset of actually redefining the physical environment we're living in. So why has Tartaria as a subject suddenly hit the consciousness in such a big way?
I think the pandemic gave people a lot of time that they didn't have, time that we would have spent commuting or socializing. And a lot of people started to dig. And the more you dig, if you're looking into conspiracy theories, it's the biggest one of them all. To add 800 years to our timeline and wipe out an entire civilization, that beats the moon landings hands down.
Mm. Oh yeah.
Um, Now, it all started from a leaked FBI document. Um, I don't know who leaked it. I do have it. I don't know who leaked it, but that happened around the time of the pandemic. And I think that the reason behind that is that a lot of people, I don't know who these people are, but they're referred to as the white hats, people that have
Mm.
been put in places of power to infiltrate and slowly release information or guide and steer things. Um, People claim that it was leaked along with lots of other information by them. And I think with a lot more time on our hands, we were able to dig. Now, I was introduced to Tartaria by someone called Max Egan.
Mm.
He's been
Mm.
kicked off YouTube now.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to find information on him because a lot of his stuff's on BitChute, which we can no longer access without a VPN in the UK.
Mm.
I hate using UK or United Kingdom because it's not what it means, as we know, but
Yeah.
for ease. Um, so I found Tartaria through Max Egan. And what I then did was started looking for old books, and it's always been there. Ian Fleming's brother, Peter Fleming, Ian Fleming of James Bond fame, he actually wrote a book a very long time ago called My Travels in Tartary. Marco Polo wrote about his travels in Tartaria. Some people call it Great Tartary, some people Tartaria, and it just depends regionally
Mm.
on what people call it. But geographically, it's Asia and the Northern Hemisphere really.
Mm.
Russia, Eastern Europe, going across to America. Um, so I think that it became exposed by somebody out there that was perhaps triggered to leak the FBI document, which clearly states that they wanted, it's a very old document, that they wanted every trace of Tartaria, Great Tartary, and Tartary removed from maps, removed from encyclopedias, the internet now, but any reference to it had to be removed. They wanted to completely delete it. And it was because of how they built. You mentioned the sort of brutalist architecture that we see. And that's, I believe, for two purposes. One, because it's a very negative space to be in.
Mm.
Your vibration will be low. You won't feel very exactly euphoric being inside one of those buildings. But I also think they're built like that because they can come back down a lot easier. If you
Mm.
compare them to how we used to build the Greco-Roman buildings, um, something like St. Paul's, for example, would take a lot more bombing
Yeah.
or a far bigger earthquake, fire or flood than what they're popping up now. So I think the easier they go up, the easier they come down. And a lot of those buildings and a lot of offices are built that way too. These white collar factories
Mm.
are all very similar. And I
Mm.
think that they're built like that to suppress us and keep us in this sort of almost dumbed down negative state. And I think while we're in that position, we don't question
Mm,
anything.
mm,
But I also believe when we look at buildings like the Shard or the Gherkin in London, that they might look impressive, but actually I think there's a lot more to that than meets the eye. I think there's a huge emphasis on how much easier it is to demolish or destroy something that's built in that way.
mm. It's interesting, isn't it, how great leaders throughout history have always built great monuments to themselves and their civilizations they've created, and they were always in awe. So you had buildings that had huge, great steps leading up, and you were in awe of these buildings.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems to me that the Tartarian buildings had that otherworldly feeling of being almost unworldly, otherworldly, of greater than a human achievement. That a lot of those buildings just seem to be so magnificent and intricate, and you get mesmerized by looking at them, and the detail that is on those buildings is extraordinary. I mean, besides the technology that they are, because they're quite clearly technological buildings, but just the vastness of experience, and you could spend days and days and days, if not a whole lifetime, in some of these buildings. Um, and they give you a sense of not of humility, but also of a wider consciousness. These new buildings that are being built, they it's the same as cars. A friend of mine the other day said they're building cars now so we fall out of love with them. So there's no
Yes.
there's no passion in cars
Mm,
anymore. And it's the same with architecture. And obviously we live in the 3D world, we live in the physical world, material world, and the more boring it makes, the more boring it is for us, the more boring we become.
mm,
And with Tartaria, it takes you into another world. So, I mean, what's interesting for me is, I suppose it's to do with the Russian Revolution in a lot of ways, but Russia has always been a huge unknown. And like I mean, I studied Russia for O level, and my knowledge and the Overton window that we have in the UK about Russia is quite small, really.
yeah.
We don't have any real knowledge about it. We do know about the kind of the Siberian, vastness, unknown Siberia, and it's a huge, great piece of land
Yeah.
that we have no, our consciousness has not really tapped into it.
No.
And now suddenly we're realizing that this place isn't just 1,000 miles of nothingness.
No. No. And it used to be called Archangel before
Really?
it was called Siberia. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And
So
I think that,
yeah, I was going to just lead on from that because, our physical environment is really important to who we are and how we react with the world. I'm a great one. I encourage, especially when we do the Shrine seminars, to get people out into nature. And actually, I said this with my talk with Dr. Delaney the other day. If you put a group of people in a field for a week, they start talking a different language. They start thinking in different ways. They start behaving in different ways. They actually start expressing joy in a very natural way. They just become totally different human beings. Um, uh, and obviously, with these buildings, they did have multi-dimensional aspects to them. My question, Guy, is really, was it one bloodline? Let's put it that way. That built these. Built. Was it a? Is it a consciousness? I'm not going to use the word race, but I am going to use the word bloodlines. Have they come from one particular consciousness? What is it? Was it a global family that spread their message and their expression of life around the globe? Who were these people? And where are they now?
yeah. Yeah. So who built them? But that depends on where you sit.
Yeah.
If you are religious, as I said earlier on, we are now in Satan's little season. But prior to that, the period of time that we refer to as the Tartarian Empire, which isn't the Tartarian Empire isn't a period of time. The Tartarian Empire was an area, an expanse of land that I mentioned
Yes.
earlier on. But it's also referred to as the millennial reign of Christ, 1,000 years where architecture is built in harmony. Everything is done in harmony and in balance with all living matter. So the buildings that you mentioned, cathedrals, are worth talking about. The windows are built using cymatics.
Yeah.
Now you think that that's technology of, we're looking at the patterns that sound and different frequencies can make. Now, to be able to do that at a time when we're told they didn't have the technology begs a few questions.
Mm.
So these windows that we see, the round windows in churches and cathedrals, they're cymatic. And the idea with those buildings is that you went inside and the pipe organs healed your organs, the bells emitted a frequency inside and around the buildings that made everybody feel good. So people were healthier, happier, and they had a more vibrant, more prosperous and productive community as a direct result and civilization. So people would argue that those buildings were built by the angels. Now, what they mean by that, as I said a moment ago, depends on where you're sat. So who these people were? Well, the technology, the blueprints, if you like, was shared. And that spans the world. So you can go to South America, you can go to New Zealand, you can go to Samoa, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, anywhere that's been flattened, and you'll see that the architecture is identical. In every city, in every town in the world, the architecture is identical. You'll find buildings that are the same. So who actually built these? All we know, it was a civilization that we refer to as the Tartarians. But people that call it the millennial reign of Christ, which I do lean towards. I was not a religious person until I started digging a lot deeper into Tartaria than most people who are into it. I
Mm.
had to dig deep, and I'm still continuing to do that now, which is why I'm looking at old Greek references and reading things like, the Book of Enoch and the Ethiopian Bible. I'm looking for more information because these angels that they're referring to, I think it was a higher level of consciousness that
Mm.
actually is what
Mm.
they're talking about, and that these people were all different creeds and colors and all different shapes and sizes, from what we
Mm.
would refer to as someone that's a dwarf to someone we would refer to as a giant. And I do mean giant. If you look at these doors and windows in a lot of these
Mm.
buildings, okay, we might say that these doors are large because they're giving that grandiose feel, but it's not practical at a time when labor, if we follow the narrative, was hard to find, materials were hard to find, and there wasn't the money.
Mm.
If we look at the backstory of these buildings, they were built usually around the time of a civil war, um, or with a very small population in that particular area, where skilled craftsmen weren't, according to the narrative, easy to come by. These were built by people with a much higher level of consciousness. I think that they were certainly not having issues with a pineal gland being calcified, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's a higher level of consciousness because people were going into these cathedrals to recharge their batteries, quite literally.
Mm.
These were
Mm.
centers of energy, cathode, row. They were centers of energy and healing. They were not places you went to worship. And of course, Jesus actually said that you don't go somewhere to pray. It's something you do in solitude on your own. If you're
Mm.
meditating or contemplating or praying, you do that in private. You don't go somewhere to do it, and you certainly don't go to a building and have someone else tell you how to do it. So I think they
Mm.
bastardized these places that they were centers of energy and healing.
Mm.
So I think there's a huge emphasis towards spirituality
Mm.
within that what we call the Tartarian Empire or the millennial reign of Christ. So you could say built by angels. I think that they were just a higher level of consciousness. And
Yeah.
some people that in Russia, if you sat down with Putin and put a gun to his head, he would say that Tartaria, which he does talk about, he's exposed it several times, going back actually to about 2012. He first exposed Tartaria and said he was going to tell the world. He would say that Tartaria is a civilization that's kind of descended from Hyperborea. but I like to call it an echo of Atlantis.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah. I
it's building using that sort of energy,
mm, mm,
um,
mm.
passion and
Yeah, that's really powerful actually. When you were talking earlier, it's interesting. It's like it feels like a consciousness.
mm,
It feels like
collective.
well, yeah, it almost feels like if I can call it this, a source connected consciousness.
Absolutely right.
So it can exist anywhere,
Yeah,
in any soul that is source connected.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, just quickly, I'll just as an aside because you'll like this, the Octagon Room at Wells Cathedral. I went in there a couple of years ago. I was in the midst of doing Mantak Chia's Qigong course in Glastonbury, so I was in a very deep place at the time anyway. And I went with two Americans. I just took them over there. First time I've been in the Octagon Room. It's an extraordinary appendage to the main cathedral. And Wells Cathedral is an extraordinary place anyway. It's right on the Michael Mary line.
yeah,
It's right there. And I went into the library and I just went, oh, excuse me, what was the chapter room used for? And the guy was like, well, it was for a local administration center where landowners would come in and they would sit round and they would talk about their tithes and the different harvests and all the practicalities of the day-to-day agricultural living. And I was like, no, it was a healing chamber. Quite clearly, that building
yeah.
is acoustically designed for the most extraordinary use of the human voice. And if you had people, and in fact, um, I many occasions over the last 4 years, and I'm sure I'm going to do it at some point. I've talked to people who work with what I would call spiritual soundings, so people who are sounding, and we've almost every time realized that actually it would be great to do a flash mob, that old retro occurrence of the early 2000s, with loads of people singing in the chapter room because it's an extraordinarily powerful place that was built with, geometric accuracy, with the right stones that would hit the right frequency, and the resonance in that building is extraordinary. So they're right. They're still there, and they're so powerful, these buildings, that some of them cannot be destroyed. Um, and if they are destroyed, all hell breaks loose for a while. Uh, as is happening in France, and I don't know whether you know, but over, I think,
Yes,
2,500 churches and cathedrals. I don't know whether the cathedrals have come down, but certainly they even tried with Notre Dame, didn't they? They tried to
yeah.
destroy Notre Dame, and the plans to rebuild Notre. I don't know whether you know this story, but the plans to rebuild Notre Dame, all the ones that were tendered were to be used for secular uses. And then there was so much powerful backlash that they had to just put it back as it was, which was a beautiful moment because there was all sorts of crazy ideas, and I thought, oh my God, the whatever you want to call them, the low vibe consciousness was going to get hold of that building, but it managed to resurrect itself. So the Tartaria story is really powerful because it's like you say, it's one of the things that's so big that once you tap into it, there's just a million dots that come
Yeah.
from that subject, and just like you said with I remember the Cabbage Patch Kids when I was a kid, when they came out, and obviously that was so in your face, and it just
Mm.
didn't feel right. It was like, what is this? What is it about? So, it's great work you're doing, Guy, and you really have come to the fore at a really, really crucial time for all of us who are what I would consider to be in the truth frequency. That's what I like to call it, the truth frequency, and it's all about actually standing in our truth, and actually the disclosure of who we are and where we've come from is one of the most powerful things we can do right now. and the Tartaria story and the Tesla story as well and the Cabbage Patch. I mean, it's it's dark, isn't it? It's not
Yeah,
it's not pleasant,
it
and I
is
think
dark.
we have to do our collective shadow work. We've got to go there. If we don't go there, we can't move forward with new vigor and new ideas, and we have to cleanse what's happened in the past, but acknowledge it. So, you know, um, it's an extraordinary journey that you're on. I'm just really grateful, Guy, for you turning up.
Thank you.
Well, it's really important, isn't it? The fact that it's such a huge story, and it's such a powerful story. Just a quick one. I wanted to do. I wanted to do an event with water. I've wanted to do events with water, and I've been around people who've done water ceremonies and worked with consciousness. And I've spoken to Vader Austin and the Bards of Avalon, various different people. In fact, we did a sounding with some water and froze it at Avebury a couple of years ago at the Shine seminars, which was just great, embodying that work. And I wanted to do it at Chatsworth. And it was really bizarre because I was like, why is it Chatsworth? Why am I in Derbyshire? And then I was like, well, it's got something to do with Buxton. So why is the water in Buxton so powerful? Oh, because it runs off the Pennine, because it comes down from Yorkshire. It's like the whole of the north of England runs into Buxton, pretty much. The town hall in Buxton used to be a water therapy centre. And then you look at Chatsworth, and actually. Interestingly enough, there is water technology in Chatsworth that has been ripped out. There's little tiny clues there. There are channelings of where water used to run. And so
Yeah.
I think Chatsworth had Tartarian qualities to it. But I think, as we are kind of Cabal Central in the UK,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of this technology has been ripped out of the ground and ripped
Mm.
away from us. So, but interestingly enough, Chatsworth does still have little tiny bits here and there, and I've only sort of touched on that. But is there anywhere where you think we could go in the UK that really does scream of Tartarian technology? Where have you found that does that?
I think every town and city I've been to.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And you mentioned water therapy. I mean, the thing with Tartaria, it's actually you're supposed to pronounce it Tartaria, but I
Hmm.
can't. I've been
Hmm.
saying it too long now. Um, I was in Bath a little while ago. It was February this year, and we stayed right in the centre. And there is a water therapy hospital that's now boarded up.
Hmm.
And Bath is a classic example. Everything there is Tartarian. All of these old buildings are Tartarian. You're either looking for the Greco-Roman style or you're looking for red brick, old
Hmm.
red brick, because
Hmm.
red brick can store electricity. It's the
Hmm.
same chemical process that creates rust. It will actually store energy, and that's why asylums and prisons and orphanages were all constructed from this red brick. They weren't originally set out to be used in that way, but they when they realized that this brick would harness energy, that's when they started putting people and locking them up inside those, because it's the process of being charged and placed in a cell. You are a
Hmm.
battery.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing with the water therapy place in Bath is that I checked out the architect. I went onto Wikipedia, which is the best place to look for a lie, and it gave me the name of the architect. But unfortunately, he wasn't born in the year that the place was built. So sometimes they trip themselves up. They just
Hmm.
put someone's name against something and then it's a box ticked and they move on. But every town and city in the world will have evidence. I mean, perhaps not if you're in Dubai, but every town and city in the world it will have evidence of Tartaria. And what you're looking for is the Greco-Roman style, but more importantly, look for what they call mud flood windows. These
Hmm.
windows that pop out of the pavement and the narrative with those is that it's allowing light into the cellar or the basement. It's nonsense. I actually used to have one of those buildings, and the whole window is in place. It's just a small part of it that's visible. The rest is bricked up. I had an art gallery that had a basement that had the original front doors in the basement. And what had happened was there wasn't a basement. There'd been a fire in the town centre. Every town, wherever you live, anybody that's watching this, wherever they live, if they want to check, their town will have had a fire that would have destroyed a lot of buildings and a lot of parish records. And it would have happened late 1700s, early 1800s, and going right through, actually going right through the 19th century.
Mm.
There'll have been a fire, and it doesn't matter where you live.
Mm.
Now, this particular building we had the original front doors in the basement, and there was just a plasterboard stud wall in front of them. And I said to the landlord, "Why is there a back door in the basement? Why can I go out into a courtyard?" And he said, "Well, you'll never guess what. There was a fire here in the town, and they pushed all of the rubble into the high street and then tarmacked it over. So everybody's ground floor became a basement." Because if you think about it, building things underground is problematic.
Mm.
Why wouldn't you go up?
Mm.
So they don't let light in. That's not the idea. Everyone knows that if you've got a cellar, you're going to have problems with damp. They're terrible for everything, really, for storage of anything. They're
Mm.
only useful if we're under attack. You've got somewhere to go and hide. But then, of course, the top of the building's going to land on you, so they're not actually that useful. And that's what happened in Dresden. People went into cellars and basements to hide and melted while they were inside them,
Yeah.
or got crushed and burnt alive. So basements and cellars, I think, are perhaps weren't what we've been led to believe. They weren't places where we stored things. They were the original ground floor and up.
Yeah.
So you'll find that Wells Cathedral, Salisbury Cathedral, which also has an octagon room,
Yeah.
um, there'll be several levels underneath the ground. Maybe the first one people have access to, but there'll be more and more. So
Mm.
it's a little bit like the age-old question, why do archaeologists have to dig? If you're looking for Roman remains, why would you need a shovel? And why would you need to dig several feet into the ground? Where did all the mud come from?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
fire, flood, and a few earthquakes here and there, and they've literally completely covered a lot of buildings and a lot of architecture in mud, so we can't find it.